Welcome again to What I Did Next from A&T Media. I'm Malak Fuad. I welcome a new guest from the region on each episode, and we take a deep dive into their lives' most pivotal moments. On today's episode, entrepreneur Mohamed Al Fayed tells me what failing early in his life taught him.
I'm one of these guys that always learned the hard way. I learned from my scars. I learned from the beatings, and the more I got, the stronger I became. And it didn't happen in let's say the first 10 failures I've experienced. It happened on the 100th, and then the aha moment of, oh, well, every time I fail, I learn something the hard way, and more importantly, the character building process was clearer, and then became more resilient, and with resilience came a risk appetite. So my fear of the unknown, or my fear of risk or failure, started to dissipate over time, and my actions became a little bolder. And I think, I'm standing here today on the back of all of that.
Mohamed Al Fayed is a co-founder and CEO of Grubtech. He's a digital advisor as well as a mentor, and he calls himself a tech disruptor. While you may not have heard of him directly, you'll have come across some of his work. Beginning his career with Macy's, one of the largest retailers in the United States, Mo led the launch of Mamas and Papas and Gap in the GCC, as well as the region's largest luxury online marketplace, Ounass. He also served as Senior Vice President of Omnichannel at Tayer Group, where he worked for 12 years before launching his startup, Grubtech. As a host, you never really know when an interview will be great, but that's what Mo's episode is. He has a great professional story that he shares eloquently, and a very moving personal story that shapes his outlook today. He acknowledges how much he has changed from the young guy starting out 30 years ago in the US. I was deeply moved by Mo's story, and it reminds me that we are all made up of so many parts and layers. We are never one thing at any one time. We are always changing and learning. Mo is Egyptian, but grew up in Saudi before going to a US military boarding school in Bahrain. His first pivot came while at the University of North Carolina studying biology. He realized he preferred business and moved to Miami to complete a dual major in international business and marketing.
The real reason why I just couldn't decide between the two, to be honest with you, and I was having way too much fun in university.
Clearly, you chose a party town, right? Miami.
I did, and the running joke between my friends is I actually went to vacation in Miami and ended up staying 14 years. That's truly what happened.
So tell me a little bit what followed from there.
So haven't spent that time in the military academy or military school. I was very fascinated with discipline. It suited my personality. I felt that the more rigor and routine I had in my life, from how I made my bed to how I woke up to when I ate to the more or less stressed I was in life. So I really, after graduating, I had two doors. The military came knocking, and the U.S. Marines had a massive drive that year in our campus, and they're, again, this is right after 9/11, so they were looking for Arabic speaking brown folk, and those that could handle both sides of the equation, the US and the non-US. And it was quite appealing. They do present a very good lifestyle, between the ability to go to different countries, you're living on a base, you're part of a strong brotherhood or a community. So I actually went as far as going through the whole routine, and on the day of signature, I pulled up to the recruiting office, and those of you who've seen them, they're just usually in strip malls in the US somewhere. I sat in the car, and I leaned back, and I'm like, there's no coming back from this. Once you ink that
Of
paperwork,
course.
they own you for a good 4 to 5 years. And if you break it, you're AWOL. You're absent without
Oh,
leave.
really? Oh, wow. You're a deserter.
And there's, consequences.
Of course. Of
So
course.
I sat in the car, and I just, something told me that this was not the right time. So I drove home. I got a call from the recruiter going, "Hey, you didn't show up, blah, 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 blah." And I was like, "Look, I'm not feeling well. I'm really sick." And interestingly enough, as life always does, it presents you with surprises. And that night, I got a phone call, or that evening, I got a phone call from Macy's, the Macy's organization. And it said, "Hey, look, we're having this day in the life of a Macy's executive. It's a full day. You get to come in and you get to see a whole bunch of departments, and you get to follow a bunch of executives around to kind of see what they are. And if this is something you're excited about, we get you into this executive training program, and then you do a couple of years, and you start a great career in retail. And retail was not on the radar. So I said, well, you know what? I'm not doing anything that Friday, and I can kick the can down the road with the recruiter for a little bit more. And I showed up, and at the end of the day, they make that. What I didn't know, it was a massive interview, right? They don't tell you is at the end you'll actually get a job offer if they selected you. And I got a job offer at the end of at that day at 6 p.m. And they said, look, we're going to give you the weekend to think about it, and we're going to need your answer on Monday morning. And I said, well, if I start, when do I get to start? They're like, well, you signed the paperwork on Monday. You're starting on Tuesday. And I'm like, okay. So I went home, and I had, behind door number one, U.S. Marines, and behind door number two, work in Macy's. And I figured, you know what? The Marines are always going to be there.
That's right.
There's no interview process. Whenever you
Yeah.
want to come in, you can come in,
Yeah.
right? But Macy's, this is a shot. Let me
Well,
see.
it's also much less of a commitment. I mean, you can walk away when you want to.
Very true. Very, very
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
I said, I'm curious about how retail works. Let me just go check it out for a couple of months. Worst case scenario, I'll just come back.
Yeah.
And that spawned a career that lasted almost 2 decades.
And it's interesting because it's a very corporate world, and it's a very formalized world and very uniform in a way, which is not where you ended up, obviously, in the startup world. So you came, Macy's sent you to Dubai. Is that what happened, or did you have some time with them first in the US?
No, so I did about 20 years jumping around the Macy's Inc. organization. And
Okay.
for readers or the audience, Macy's is a master company, but Bloomingdale's sits under Macy's East, Macy's West, and Macy's Florida. So there's multiple divisions to this behemoth of a retailer. It's a real academy. I mean, Macy's is such an institution for retailers that when you come out of it, you just really know your stuff. Like they put you through the grinder. And I started as an assistant planner level one, which is the first rung in the ladder, and I found myself as a director of planning on the end of it, which is kind of like the top of the food chain in my discipline, which is merchandise planning. And then I got a random call on a beautiful morning, and hey, I'm a recruiter. I work for this company called Altair. I said, sure. And he's like, have you heard of Dubai? And I'm like, yeah, everybody watches National Geographic at the time, and they were building the Palm, and everything was going on. It was the
Yeah.
heyday of Dubai rising to what it is today. And they said, well, look, this company in Dubai just signed up the first franchise rights to Bloomingdale's, the first Bloomingdale's outside of the US. Would you be up to meeting the CEO? She's going to be in DC. So I end up meeting this lady named Shireen Al Khatib. And those of you who don't know, she's a titan in the retail space of the Middle East. She was the CEO of Altair, then she bounced around a little bit, and then she became CEO of Majid Al Futtaim Retail. Then she became CEO of Majid Al Futtaim Mall. So everything from Mall of the Emirates to Mall of Arabia and Egypt and in
Hmm.
between. So I got to meet her, and I just was celebrity struck. This woman was a trailblazer for her gender, for the retail space in the Middle East, for what she was, trying to do, bringing all these amazing brands to the Middle East, like the Gucci's and Pradas and Valentinos, and whatever she was going to offer me, I was just going to take right then and there. I just wanted to work under her. I wanted to learn from her. I wanted to, absorb everything this woman was all about. I did that for about 7 years, looking after about 220 stores and three department stores until the entrepreneurial bug bit again.
So 7 years with Al Tayer. This brings us to what year?
So 2008 to I want to say 2012. No, I'm still with Altair till 2019.
Aha.
Okay, but and I get to Dubai 2008. 2 years into being in Dubai, life hands me a beautiful gift, which is my two best friends, almost brothers from the Saudi era, who we were kind of zigzagging through life together.
Yeah.
And I had left behind in New York City. Both within a span of a month got jobs and moved to Dubai.
Isn't that funny how that happens, huh? It's amazing.
Absolutely. I've known these guys for 38 years, and we find ourselves in Dubai under the same roof in 2008. So, as guys do, we got bored of talking about cars and vacations, and we started to look at how do we keep ourselves more intellectually stimulated. And we started investing in the ecosystem of startups in 2010. And our first investment was this startup called Market VIP, which was an Oasis 500 graduate, which was an incubator accelerator out of Jordan. And it was the first real apparel and beauty e-commerce platform. And we, collected money from about 20 guys, and we made a sizable investment. And through that investment lens, I started to understand what was happening in the digital arena in the Middle East around 2010, right? Which was sub 1%.
Absolutely. I mean, it was really at the ground level, right?
Absolutely. Souk, Ronaldo had just kicked off Souk,
Yes.
and there was no Namshi, there was no Noon, there was no nothing. So I went to my chairman alongside my partner in crime, Khalid Al Tayer, and we convinced Mr. Ubaid. So my chairman was Mr. Ubaid Al Tayer. And for those of you who don't know who Mr. Ubaid Al Tayer is, he doubled up as the Minister of State of Finance of the UAE up until about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And we, as the chairman of this conglomerate, Altair, which does a lot more than retail, we talked to him about our whole universe is brick and mortar, yet everything is moving towards digital. We don't have a digital strategy. What should we do?
And of course, in the rest of the world, that was already happening. I mean, all the brick and mortar companies were already, moving full steam ahead on the into the digital world.
Absolutely, and we as a region as a whole, we're still squarely stuck in open more stores, open more
Yes,
malls, right?
yes.
So I would come to him with all this data, and Khaled would come to him with all this data, and 9 months of perfusive nagging. The ask was fire Mo, okay, give him some money, and let him figure out what our digital strategy is. What are we going to do about all that?
So remove you from the day-to-day running of what you had been doing up until that point.
Correct, which was
Yeah.
7 years of senior vice president, merchandise
Yeah.
planning, blah 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 blah.
That's exciting, Mo. That's really exciting for you.
I know.
Yeah,
I am
yeah,
so lucky.
yeah.
To have been right time, right place,
And to have been able to convince them.
and to have been able to convince him. So he did. He fired me, gave me the basement of the building, and gave me a little bit of money, and said, "Go figure this thing out." And with the help of an amazing group of people, well, finding an amazing group of people, and the help of an amazing group of people, we built a company called Altair Digital. And Altair Digital, most people will not know it, but it is actually the holding company that built and runs the likes of The Gap
Yeah,
online in
yeah.
our part of the world, Mamas and Papas online. And my most proudest achievement is Ounass.
You can find more about Ounass's journey to become the leader in luxury e-commerce on our members bonus episode that will be out next week. If you haven't already done so, you can subscribe in Apple Podcasts or on our website. You'll find the link in our show notes. When we come back, Mo tells me how he got the entrepreneurial bug and went on to launch Grubtech. That's right after this short break. Welcome back to my conversation with Mohamed Al Fayed. Mo, what's interesting is that you had 20 years in the US in a corporate world. Then you had about, 15 years with Al Tayer, also corporate.
Yeah.
But you felt a need to break free again, which, this entrepreneur bug wasn't always there, actually. You were very much a corporate guy, but something shifted.
Yes and no, because Altair's experience for me, that pivot out of merchandise planning into a digital,
Yes,
was an intrapreneur. Okay.
right.
So, and that's, for those who may not necessarily feel that being an entrepreneur is right for them, there's absolutely nothing standing in between you and getting a flavor of being an entrepreneur within the corporate confines if you have the latitude to be able to reinvent
That's
yourself.
right. That's a good point.
Because even though it was within the construct of a big corporation, it was still a young baby that was, heavily misunderstood, and I had free reign to kind of paint the canvas the way I want
Yeah.
to. So it fulfilled my entrepreneurship, but kept the steady paycheck of every 28 days. And at the end of the day, it was somebody else's money, which meant it was somebody else's baby, but I got to really
Play.
get
You
to,
got to play.
to play.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did get to play. So it's Christmas of 2018. I take my wife on a vacation, and while we were sitting sipping coffee on the way back to Dubai, I look at her and I say, I don't want to do this anymore. And she goes, what do you mean? And I'm like, I don't want to go back to what I was doing. And she's like, are you insane? Like, you finally got it all to work and everything is humming.
And
And
this had obviously been building in you for a while. You'd obviously been
yeah,
thinking about it. Yeah.
of course, it rears its head in either some
Sure.
frustrations or just long
Sure.
hours. But when you
Yeah.
know, and along the journey, every time I've gone against my instinct, I've paid a dear price. So fine tuning the ability to truly listen to your gut and have the courage to actually listen to your gut is it's a funny thing. So I said I don't want to do this anymore. She's like, so what are you going to do? And I said I'm going to go home and I'm going to quit. And she's like, you're out of your mind.
And at this point, Mo, how old are you? Just out of curiosity.
I had just had my twins, and they were a year old, and I was
Okay.
39.
So yeah, you're at that phase where you should not be doing this at all.
My wife thought, she's like, we have two babies. We have, as any family,
Of
rent and
course, of
cars and
course.
bills,
These are the years where you're earning and you're
and I'm not independently wealthy by any definition, and she's like, they love you, and the entire family is the most amazing experience of my life, because not only were they my bosses and my comrades and my colleagues, I was one of their
yes,
adopted
yes.
members. I went to their events and their family gatherings and the majlises, and
It felt
I'm
like
till this
family.
day,
Yeah, yeah.
they are fam. I till this day, I see them and I hang out with many of their members, and I'm just so
Mm.
tight with them. And she's like, "But you should line something up before you quit." And I said, "I know, but no. The only way I'm going to do this is if I burn the boats."
So you didn't yet have the idea for Grubtech. You left before anything was apparent. Interesting.
Nothing.
Okay.
I strongly believe, for those of you who don't know what burn the boats, if you want to take an island, you have to burn the boats in order for no recourse, no return, no
Yeah.
safety
No
net, and
way out.
no way out. And there's a story from the conquistadors for another time that we can talk about. But basically, I needed to burn the boats. I needed to get rid of the golden handcuffs that had me dependent on a fat paycheck every 28 days, that kept me in a lifestyle that made me
Mhm.
comfortable. And the only way was to break that, and then whatever comes out of that would be what I want to do. So, long story short, I walked into my boss's office with a brown letter, and on January 2nd of 2019, and I said, I'm leaving. And it didn't go well. And take a sabbatical, uh, go on
Yeah.
another vacation, really think about it. I mean, every help that they can offer for me to reconsider, and I turned all of them down, and I exited the business in November of 2019, but by summer I had been, officially
Right.
out of the business, and I was more of a
Sure,
consultant
sure.
role of the transition now. And and yeah, so I that's how I quit,
And then
and didn't have anything
let's
lined
go
up.
into the beginning of Grubtech. And you said you have two co-founders. Are these part of the
I
Saudi
do.
crew?
The one of which is my childhood friend I've known for 38 years. And yeah, so as part of the decompression of a multi-decade career in corporate, I decided I was genuinely going to take the summer off, which was my first real summer vacation in God knows how long. And I used Lebanon as a base. My wife is Lebanese, and that's where we were stationed during the summer. And I was bouncing around Barcelona, Amsterdam, blah 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 blah. And I got a phone call from Omar saying, "Hey, listen, man, I just invested in this cloud kitchen." And I said, "What is a cloud kitchen?" And he goes, "You really need to come and see this, man. It's a delivery only kitchen that makes food for multiple brands, that sells on Talabat and the likes of." I said, why did you invest in that? You know nothing about restaurants, nothing
Yeah.
about food. He's like, no, I think this is going to be a big thing. And then he's like, when are you back in town? I said, actually, interestingly enough, I got to come in and sign some paperwork for my exit and my end of service or whatever. So I'm just going to pop in for a few days. He's like, when you come in, just call me. So I get back to Dubai, I leave my family behind, and he's like, come, let me show you what I invested in. And he was a seed investor in this cloud kitchen called Icon at the time. And he goes, can you help these guys out since you're unemployed and not really doing anything? I said, sure, let me come and take a look. Right. And I walk in through the cloud kitchen, and my immediate epiphany was, this is a distribution center. This is not
Yeah.
a restaurant.
It's operational. Yeah.
Everything is cooked outside of the box and it's delivered at 5 o'clock in the morning, and you assemble it in sandwiches form or salad form or whatever and ship it out, except it happens in a short window of time, right? Lunch and dinner. But there's no tech for any of this. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, we've been doing this in retail for
Yeah.
years. Nobody's done this for food. They're like,
But
nope,
Mo,
doesn't
your
exist.
timing was unbelievable. This is summer, and then
I
COVID
know.
hits in March of the following year.
I know. I
That's
know.
unbelievable.
Luck.
Luck. Yeah. Well, my experience of doing these interviews is that the amount of people who line up an idea, line up a business, or in their personal life, um, something happens, and it's always luck that somehow changes that equation or makes or propels the idea somehow either faster than it would have happened otherwise. The idea is there. You've done the work. You've done the homework, but that indescribable element is luck.
It sure is. It's this
It's
old
amazing.
adage of timing in life is everything.
Absolutely, absolutely.
One step too soon, you're off. One step too soon, you're not gonna get it. It's that it and it yeah, so I walked out and I said, holy crap, this is a really good idea. And why should we just build it for them? Why don't we just build it for everybody? Restaurants, cloud kitchens, and anybody that and everybody who's going to be really, delivery centric and delivery heavy. And he's like, great, let's do it. I'm like, but I'm not a CTO. I don't code. I know how to speak their language
Yeah.
because I had many of them work for me, but I don't know, how to code this, but I know how it's supposed to work.
You know what you want the end result to look
Right.
like.
I'm not a painter, but I see the picture in my head.
Yes, exactly.
I'm like, we need to find a CTO. And again, luck, right? Life. Omar's wife's brother was going to boarding school in the UK with a roommate that ended up becoming one of the region's best CTOs. He had 5 startups, 3 exits, and he just so happened to be in between startups. And he's like, let's go meet this guy for coffee. And that's Mohamed Hamidi. And I had a cup of coffee with this guy and I fell in love with him, man. I mean, smart, intelligent, a strong character, great values. And we clicked. And I'm like, all right, you're not doing anything. I'm not doing anything, but Omar has a job. So let's leave Omar in his job just in case we need to get, paid. And you and I were going
So did you create Grubtech out of Icon, or did you then go and set up a separate entity?
I set up a separate entity and we called it Grubtech, obviously, and with a mission to build for the icons of the world.
Since its launch in 2020, Grubtech is now present in 18 countries, managing millions of food orders for organizations like Delivery Heroes Talabat and chains like California Pizza Kitchen, Domino's, Subway, Paul's, and much more. We'll shift gears when we come back and we learn about how a couple of very challenging pivots have shaped Mo's outlook today. That's after this break. Welcome back. This is my conversation with Mohamed Al Fayed. You mentioned to me that, well, first of all, you're the brother of Marwa Al Fayed, and Marwa was, of course, Omar Samra's wife, and Omar is an old friend of our show. He was in our first season, and of course, Marwa passed away when their daughter was born, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Was she older than you, Mo, or younger?
No, so I have twin sisters. Marwa has a twin named Rahab, and Marwa. They came 5 years after I came,
I see.
so they are my two young sisters.
Right.
Marwa passed away when she just a couple of days shy of her 31st
And
birthday.
that was in Florida, I know. You were there at the time?
I was in Miami at the time. My father, our father, is an OBGYN. He lives in Miami, Florida. So Marwa was getting ready to have her baby
Yeah.
during, the last couple of, or the last trimester, last couple of months. She felt dad could be of help, given that
Of
that's
course.
what he does
Of
for a living,
course.
right? Deliver babies. So she went to Miami to, get her nest in order and get the baby stuff and everything. But she was actually living here in Dubai as well with
Yeah.
Omar. They had just got into Wild Ganabana, Omar's, adventure travel agency, and she went to visit dad, get some tests done, and buy some baby stuff and have her baby and turn around
Yeah.
and come back. But life is not always
No, no.
roses, and
That must have been a very hard time for all of you, I'm sure.
it was, yeah, it
And
absolutely.
and in today's world, no one expects a healthy young woman to, to pass away after having a baby. I mean,
No,
these things don't happen anymore. Yeah.
when it's your time, it's your time. My dad is one of the most accomplished OBGYN. He's a professor in three different universities. He's got patents and publications up the wazoo. This is
Yeah.
Miami, the
Yeah.
United
Yeah.
States, full brunt of the medical system, and nothing
No,
could be done.
no.
Nothing could be
Yeah,
done.
well, I know that her memory lives on in the toy drive, right?
Yes,
It's a big
yes.
foundation here in Egypt.
It is, and the story for that is just an incredible story, which, yeah,
Yeah, that's
it
wonderful, and of
does.
course, in her daughter, her memory lives on in her daughter, of
It
course.
does. Tila,
Yeah,
absolutely, who's 10
yeah,
years
yeah,
old now.
yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your wife. So your wife is Lebanese.
I don't know if I should be admitting this on air or in podcast. Amani is actually my third wife. I have been horrible in selecting my
Oh
life's
wow,
partners
Mo,
and
we
had a
should have gotten
series
to this
of
at the beginning of the show.
I've been married twice before I
Oh,
married
I
my
didn't know.
wife.
Okay.
Yeah, both 7 years long, and the 7 year itch statistics is absolutely
And where
correct.
were they
I mean,
from?
so my first one was actually an Iranian American. I was married to her to 7 years minus 1 day.
Uh-huh.
The second one was pure American, Anglo-Saxon from Boston.
And this is your American phase, so we can cut up your life in
Yeah,
phase 1 and 2 by the wives,
by the
right?
wives. And then I came to the Middle East, and I said, well, I failed twice. Let me give it a shot one more time, and I'm extremely happy I did, because
That's
I love my
wonderful.
wife to
And so
bits.
you met in
I
Dubai.
met in Dubai, and as every romantic story, we fell in love, and obviously it was headed in the right direction, and we got married. And interestingly enough, she woke up one morning and she had a little what looked like a pimple on the side of her neck. And she, babe, this thing really hurts. I'm like, don't mess with it. Just leave it alone. It'll go away, as you do with all pimples. And a few days later, that pimple became a little bigger and bigger and bigger. And within a week's time, this thing was the size of a golf ball, which obviously created a lot of alarm for both of us. And we raced to the hospital. We saw a slew of
Is this
doctors
before the twins were born or
before
after?
the twins were born. Yeah. So, and we ran over to the doctors, and what is this? And they took a biopsy, and unfortunately, it was stage 4 lymphoma, cancer.
Stage 4?
Stage 4.
Huh. How old was she at the time, Mo?
She was 29 years old.
You know that I had lymphoma as well.
Did you really?
Yeah. But it's unusual that it had happened to your wife at that age because it's normally a teen disease or a post 60-year-old disease.
That is correct. That is correct.
Very unusual.
Very unusual, and interestingly enough, it was diagnosed a day to the day, I should say, a year after her father's diagnosis. Allah yarhamah, unfortunately he didn't make it.
Oh, wow.
I don't know, genetics, environmental. A lot of weird stuff was happening in Lebanon during, the
Yeah.
multiple wars. Who knows, right?
Yeah. Alhamdulillah, she's okay now.
She's been in remission a good 10 years, so I'm very proud of
That's
that.
wonderful.
We're blessed.
That's amazing. And the amazing thing is that she was able to have babies after because that's a potentially
No,
not
no,
likely.
and hence the twins, obviously, and it's a human assisted. Let's put it that way.
Of course, well, yeah, why not? I mean, that's what medicine's there for, right? Yeah.
Absolutely,
Well,
absolutely.
it's interesting because my story,
Okay,
I got it. So I have two boys.
mashallah.
I have an 18-year-old and I have a 16-year-old. And when I was pregnant with my 16-year-old, I had complications and I had a very difficult end of pregnancy.
Okay.
And he was premature. And after he was born, I was diagnosed 7 weeks
Oh,
after he was born.
jeez,
Yeah.
that's a tough
With
period too.
Hodgkin's, yeah. It had no impact on him, thank God, but obviously I had been
God
sick being
bless.
pregnant. But that's hard on a couple, that's hard on a family.
I tell you, these are two areas I typically shy from surfacing them on podcasts, but as they've happened about a decade ago, I'm getting more and more comfortable sharing both of them for two various reasons. And I'll start with my wife because it's the one that I'm more comfortable. And you would relate, you've walked that path. The resilience I saw on a fragile human being looking down the barrel of basically a terminal disease, for lack of a better word, and the arduous treatment that you endured.
What did she do? Chemo?
Emo, absolutely. I mean, it was a vicious because it was stage 4. It was over 11 sites, ovaries, lungs, brain. I mean, it was everywhere. She was lit
Yeah,
up like a
yeah,
Christmas tree. This was not
yeah,
a
yeah.
local story.
Alhamdulillah, she was young. I think being young makes a massive difference in this situation.
Massive difference. And I'll never forget the first chemo session, and we're terrified and we don't know what to expect. We've spoken to everybody, and it's horror stories, right? You lose your hair, you're throwing up,
Yeah.
you lose weight. It's not a pleasant experience by any measure. And I'll never forget my wife's courage and the brave face she had on. She did not shed a tear. She laughed with all the nurses. She went and visited every single child in the ward and made balloons and laughed with them. And she treated it as if she was taking a flu shot. And if it was me, I don't think I would have been able to get out of the cab.
You would, because it's so grave, Mo. You're in such a dire situation. You don't have a choice. What are you gonna do?
I the you both to have gone through this experience, you solidify the testament of courage and standing in front of adversity with pride and dignity, okay, and coming out at the end of that. And no matter what has happened over the 10 years from that moment onwards, when things got super difficult in the startup world, and those of you who are entrepreneurs know, you will come to a point in which you barely have enough money to make next month's payroll, okay, and your raise is
Yeah.
stuck in the ether. And I reflect back on my wife's smile as she's undergoing this horrific treatment, um, and coming out at the end of it as the brave soldier that she did, just like you. And I hold on to that throughout all my difficult times. If she
Yeah.
could do
Yeah.
that, I can do anything.
It's exactly right. I mean, nothing is daunting after that experience.
No, no, and I use that so frequently through my challenges because of the courage she's taught me through that experience. And Marwa's case, that's an interesting one. So, being young in your 30s, you're chasing the business classes, the first classes, the Rolex, and then the Rolex is not enough. I want an AP, and the AP is not enough. I want a gold AP, and I want, a second home in Marbella, and and I was on that trajectory where it was just material possession, addiction. And Marwa passed away obviously in Miami, and we chose to bury her in Egypt. And that was during June 30th, which was the Grand Revolution, right?
Yeah,
There was
2013. Yeah.
yeah, so the streets are packed and nobody knows what the heck is going on, and it was chaos by every definition of the
Yeah.
word. And we managed to get her on a Egypt Air flight and bring the body back and commence with the funeral arrangements. But anyways, the story for me was none of us really knew how much good Marwa did while she was alive. Okay, until that funeral. And after burying Marwa, I come out of the grave, and there's the Egyptian traditions, and I'm shaking hands with people, And I met so many different faces that I didn't know. And I would say, "How do you know my sister?" And one would say, "I was the coffee boy in the office where she worked, and I'm on dialysis, and she would collect money every month from the employees to pay for my dialysis." I met a diabetic who was imprisoned because he couldn't meet his debt obligations. Then Marwa collected money and got his debt relieved, and he was released. I met no less than 50 people that are not family, they're not relatives, they're not coworkers. There are people that Marwa had done something for.
In a very quiet and very discreet way, she helped
She
them.
touched their lives. And my epiphany or my learning of that day is that's really all you leave behind.
Yeah.
It's the fingerprints that you hope will withstand the waves of time. And these fingerprints are how you made others feel while you were still here. Okay. And that moment was a defining moment in my life. That's when I wore nothing but black t-shirts and white t-shirts, average run-of-the-mill clothes. I drive a Ford. I live in a normal home. It doesn't matter what's in the bank account. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions, or tens of dollars. It does not matter anymore.
You can't take it with you anyway, Mo. So,
It does. I
I agree with you
relinquished that,
completely.
and I focused on my mentorship. I focused on my pursuit of foundational help, what I'm truly passionate about, gender equality and child or children plights around the world, and the list goes on. So those two experiences really helped shape my adult life.
Yeah.
One in courage and the other in what true meaning of life is.
And I'm sure that somewhere in your psyche, Mar was passing, and even your wife's illness was something that spurred you on to do your own thing with Grubtech. I mean, you decided life is short. Maybe it's time to do something that you maybe wanted to do forever and hadn't even realized.
Yeah, we really never fathom how short of a window of time we have on this planet until it's over.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
one of my mentors once said, "Do you want to go into your pine box in pristine condition in a suit and all done up, or do you want to go broken, bruised, and beat up?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "The
Having really
latter."
lived.
Give me that.
Mo, this was amazing. Thank you.
No
This was a
problem.
great conversation.
Thank you so much for
I
having me.
feel like I've known you for a really long time.
Oh, I think there's a lot of similarities between your life paths and mine.
That was my episode with Mohamed Al Fayed, co-founder and CEO of Grubtech. As a digital disruptor, Mo was named on the Middle East's Power 50 list by Caterer Middle East in 2021. If you're a member of the show, you'll get a bonus episode with Mo where we talk about his early years and the concept behind Ounass, the region's premier luxury marketplace. That'll be out next week. As always, you can find extended clips from all our episodes on YouTube and connect with us on Instagram, X, and on LinkedIn. Just search for What I Did Next. Thank you for joining me today. You've been listening to What I Did Next from A&T Media. I'm Malak Fuad, and the show is produced by Chirag Desai. See you in a couple of weeks.